This video will look over the problematic situation of balancing with the most recent tier, with discussing the new changes that were released in 6.21. This initial problem began with the release of the new Savage tier, Pandemonium Abyssos. Week 1 teams found themselves to be up against not only challenging mechanics, but an extremely tight DPS check on phase 1 of P8S, creating a very difficult wall halfway through the fight. Setting aside world races, which understandably are using the most efficient party comps available to clear the tier within the first few days, many other week 1 teams were forced to switch out jobs for better RDPS and personal DPS. Examples included switching Paladin and or Warrior out for Dark Knight and Gunbreaker, as their tank DPS outmatched them by around 300 to 500 personal DPS and RDPS. Most comps seemingly required Dancer for the RDPS, tech step and buffs, forcing others to switch off of Bard. Despite the high RDPS from Black Mage week 1, ranging from around 9,000 to 10,200, Summoner was mostly chosen as caster for its party buffs and versatility, along with its usefulness in prog and its personal DPS being around 250 to 300 higher than Red Mage, leaving Red Mage seemingly out of logged runs for week 1. This creates the question of, should players be forced to switch jobs to clear difficult content? My answer is no. All jobs should be viable to clear week 1 of the Savage content, whereas world racers should be using the most efficient and high DPS comps to clear the tier as quickly as possible. Giving a quick example of a potential party comp that would have been nigh impossible to clear with week 1 would include Paladin, War, Machinist, Dragoon, Red Mage, Reaper, Sage and Astro, due to their difference in DPS potential compared to the other jobs in their role type, as well as their contribution to RDPS and party buffs. FF14 Momo discusses the RDPS check and, despite the weak head start regarding gear for this tier, how it wasn't tuned around said gear. Further states it's more about balancing and the percentiles being widely different compared to Shadowbringers. Most jobs were within the 1 to 3% range. Square Enix decided to deal with this by releasing maintenance for patch 6.21, adding potency buffs for Warrior and Paladin as shown. However, no other jobs were buffed with 6.21. This came as a surprise due to Machinist, who is apparently in need of potency buffs to contend with Dancer and Bard's contribution to RDPS within week 1. Although Machinist's personal DPS week 1 almost matched with some melees when comparing player rotation execution, creating an interesting discussion surrounding player skill level and difficulty of each job. However, this leads back to the question of buffing and balancing multiple jobs and why it didn't happen. Perhaps the difficulty involves a more complicated process, fine-tuning, and the concern of indefinitely lowering a difficulty of said fight by increasing DPS potencies. This leading to clearing the fight with damage downs, etc., which would allow for easily avoidable mistakes. Square Enix released a statement with 6.21 along with a HP nerf, saying that due to the dev team completing the fight, they balanced it to this accordingly, which then seemed extremely difficult for the actual player base. The player base interpreted this as, we didn't realise the difference in skill level between the dev team and the player base, therefore we've nerfed it by 1%. In short, lol, player base lacks skill, and the memes have been in full force since release. However, this feels like a less satisfying solution to the main issue, actually balancing jobs correctly to make each one viable for players to complete the tier on their chosen jobs. Even within week 3, there is a very low number of Machinists and Reapers who've cleared the fight, along with Black Mages across all regions that are recorded. The nerf of HP brings a split between the player base. Some now feel cheated out of an extremely challenging fight due to the nerf, whereas others feel relieved with the nerf to play their favourite jobs, and not rely on the slow weekly grind of gear to build up their DPS. Which brings us to another important factor to consider is gear priority 2, which more efficiently should be given to melees due to the higher DPS. and this could have affected the numbers from week 1 to current statistics. A few days later, after the maintenance, Square Enix released yet another statement, most likely to address the backlash from the player base and expand upon their 6.21 changes, or the lack thereof. It begins with an apology for the insufficient explanation Square Enix initially provided, stating this post is to clear up any misunderstandings. They stated the reason for the HP adjustment was due to a miscalculation, and said miscalculation leading to consequences of certain jobs being excluded and a growing dissatisfaction with the punishing difficulty. The next section explains the source of the miscalculation. The premise of the top percentage of players are overwhelmingly better than the dev team and thus base adjustments on this. In addition, adding a little bit extra to boss values before rechecking and re-releasing the fight. The little bit extra relating to 1 to 2% HP. The final section of the new statement addresses why they adjusted the duty rather than the job balance. Each job's potencies are adjusted with respect to the difficulty of rotation, support actions, and its effects. They believed that the jobs in need of emergency adjustments because of these factors were Paladin and Warrior, but understand due to the aforementioned issues, certain jobs were better suited, therefore resulting in a situation where players felt obligated to choose jobs with higher DPS output. Any attempt to resolve this by buffing certain jobs would negatively impact the overall balance of each role, and adjusting all jobs in a short period of time is not feasible. This summarises the new statement released by Square Enix. All in all, I am an observer who has been watching the progression of the raids, trying to gather accurate information and others' opinions to highlight the potential problems of this tier's job balancing. I wanted to open up more discussions of this topic too. Thank you for listening, and thank you to Java Monkey for allowing me to use his PA test footage too. Thank you.